Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar. A very interesting topic that we have here today. And trying to ESG, of course, is a very important topic uh, going forward for the future of our planet. And of course, how it's aligned to Islamic finance. So very interesting topic, and I have a even stronger panel today. Uh, First off, let me welcome Atif. Atif Iqbal. He is the head of strategy at Emirates Islamic. He drives the bank's strategic initiatives and business growth. He has extensive experience in banking and in finance and has led key projects focused on operational efficiency, digital transformation, and overall the presence of Emirates Islamic in and around Middle East and globally as well. Atif, welcome.
Thank you very much, Nikhil. Hi, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Next up, Vikram Krishna. He's the co-founder of Sacred Groves. It's a social enterprise and dedicated to protecting natural habitats and fostering environmental stewardship. He has been a career banker, and that he combines his industry experience with his commitment to sustainability. It's a very powerful combination to have on our webinar today. Vikram, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Look forward to the conversation.
Let me now welcome Nada. Nada is a professor of marketing and strategy and sustainability at SP Jain School of Global Management. She leads the sustainability initiatives at the university, at this SP Jain School. She brings in deep expertise when it comes to sustainability, strategic marketing. She has a background of marketing and of course business management. I think I'm going to direct all the questions related to why communication and telling everyone the importance of ESG is important. I'm going to direct all those questions to you, Nada. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is a very relevant topic. I'm looking forward to a very interesting exchange of ideas.
Perfect. Last but not the least, Melina. Melina Talk is the head of core banking at Azentio Software. She leads product development and strategy for core banking solutions. I think that's the powerhouse when it comes to being able to provide innovative products and services across all functions, and Islamic finance and ESG being a very key growing area. She drives innovation, manages product portfolios, and enhances the financial services across the globe. Melina, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nikhil.
I'm very excited. The reason why of my excitement is we have such a beautiful mix of speakers today. We have someone who is out and out core a banker, a technologist, an academician, a climatologist, and my name is Nikhil Gokhale. I am the director in the research team at IBS Intelligence. I lead research initiatives and the development of proprietary research platforms. I have more than 2 decades of experience in financial technology, and I would say in my small way, I have contributed to shaping the perspectives of banking and insurance industry as a whole. So thank you everyone for joining in. I'm going to dive straight into it, but before I get started, a very interesting poll headed your way. I'm not going to start easy. I'm going to start with a tough one. Do you believe ESG financing is fundamentally at odds with profitability? And when I say fundamentally at odds with profitability, it's the profitability from a financial institution or a bank side. The options you have is yes, ESG financing often compromises profitability. Second option, no, ESG financing and profitability can coexist and complement each other. Third, depends on the industry, so essentially you're saying that in some industries you may have a positive margin, or in some industries you may not have a positive margin. And fourth is unsure. You need more evidence. So, you're still, the jury is still out there. Who does what? Nobody's sure. So let's give it this one, we give it 30 more seconds for everyone to respond in. And the reason why I want to really start off with this question is we've been talking about ESG, we've been talking about why ESG is important, and everyone, politically maybe it's incorrect for anyone to actually say that ESG is not important. But is it because that, is it because of political, not being seen as politically correct? Or are you actually seeing some merit in terms of financial performance out there, right? Uh, let's see. I'm going to end the poll, and we have a divided world. Yes, no, and it depends. I think we have all three responses. So I'm going to share the results. As I said, all three. Thank God, nobody's saying unsure, right? So I'm going to start with that question, right? There's some people who accept that yes, there is a challenge when it comes to profitability. I'm going to direct this question to you, Atif. Uh, do you really think that ESG and profitability is at odds?
Thank you very much, Nikhil. I don't think that ESG and profitability are at odds. And the basic reason for saying that is that, look, as an Islamic banker, we do ethical banking. And by practicing ethical banking and banking based on Sharia principles, we are able to compete, and we are able to garner market share, garner profitability in the businesses that we do. I think overall, if you see, ESG is very much in line with the Sharia principles. So I think if, as Islamic banks in the last 50 years since inception, where we have reached is a stage where we do command a presence. So that means that there are customers, like-minded customers, who prefer ethical banking or Sharia banking from a religious perspective and from a moral value perspective. So I think ESG has an opportunity to grow, and it is really about how you tap into that opportunity and how you present it towards the customers, that ultimately, whether it's a bank or any other organization who is operating, can make money in that situation. Because at the end of the day, ESG will drive certain economic behavior. There will be some evolution from customers in that space. And when the customers will demand that, then the organizations or different sectors have to respond. And that kind of an evolution of the business practices would lead to profitable transactions, provided you are looking at it from that eye. If it is just a check mark exercise, which a lot of people do, or treat it as greenwashing, of course, if they treat it as just a cost of doing business, then they will probably complicate their lives. And that's where probably the challenge is, that if you are really looking at it as a regulatory compliance thing or as an add-on to support your brand from a marketing perspective, if you look at that as cost of doing business, then of course the perception would be that it's an added burden on your profitability. I hope it answers the question.
Interesting, it does, and very clearly, as very interestingly say that it's don't do it as a checkbox item, do it as a business practice, and then there is money to be made. I'm going to put the same question with a slightly different lens, Vikram, to you. Uh, same question, but in a slightly different point of view in terms of do you think regulatory support would be required? How important is regulatory support to make sure that there is some kind of a level playing field when it comes to ESG, having ESG standards and making sure that ESG is profitable?
Yeah,
So,
okay. Sorry.
So this question I'm directing it to you, Vikram, and then Atif, you could respond if you
okay,
have a
perfect.
point of view.
So carrying forward from where Atif left, ESG and particularly E is definitely not at odds with business. The context to it is that we're already at a 1.5-degree world. So 2024 was the hottest year in our recorded human history. And the subsequent years ahead are going to get progressively hotter. So it's only a matter of detail, but over the next 10 to 15 years, we are facing a 2-degree world for sure. So what does a 2-degree or a 1.5-degree world mean? Recently, the World Economic Forum just released their global risk report. And what they highlighted in that global risk report is that, how are the CXOs of global corporations seeing business risk from a short-term and a medium-term perspective? From a short-term perspective, yes, environmental and climate risk was in the top 3. But when you see from a medium to a long-term perspective, climate risk, environmental risk pretty much dominates. And the number they've come up with is that 50 to 70% of the world's GDP would be at risk as the global temperatures consistently cross the 1.5-degree guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So having said that, if I were to quote again the UN in particular on this, it's a all in, everybody all at once. So when you see all in, everybody all at once, regulations has an important role to play. We've seen the COP process, we've seen the Paris Agreement. Yes, of course, there are a lot of debates around that in terms of its efficacy. But the point is that organizations, institutions, governments all over the world are trying to build consensus in terms of what the target should be when it comes to compliance and come up with a string of regulations which are universally accepted to make sure that there is adequate guidance to governments and institutions to drive this agenda forward. It's tough. It's not easy. We sometimes take one step forward and 2 steps back. But the order of the day is climate risk is a huge threat to profitability. And progressive organizations, as Atif mentioned, if they view the E part in ESG from an opportunity perspective, one needs to understand that there is a growing consuming class globally that expects organizations to follow ethical, transparent, compliant practices as a norm. So
Mm-hmm.
those organizations, banks, institutions who integrate this into their everyday, into their value system, should start seeing enormous benefits coming their way.
Very interesting. You very clearly you mentioned about how driving consensus is important. I think it is very important. I said it as a level playing field, but I think yeah, overall important to make sure that there are a set of guidelines. I don't want to call them rules, but a set of guidelines to make sure that everyone is able to adhere to them, and then no big nation plays roles. I think the change in political regime will have an impact. Without naming names, I think the biggest countries have to now, we have to watch out for how it's going to pan out, given the change in North American region. But then again, I think, and I'm going to bring Nada into the conversation. Nada, I think Vikram touched upon the E part. Do you want to unpack the E, S, and G, just how you see it of the whole ESG discussion?
So thank you, Nikhil. Yes, for sure. Today, it is very well proven that doing ESG the right way brings additional profits. There is a report that came out this year from McKinsey showing that if we compare companies who are just doing profits and revenue, they get a total shareholder return of 5%. For companies who do all three, revenue, profits, and ESG, they get 2 extra points of total shareholder return. So there is no question today that if done properly, this will bring additional revenue to companies. It will make them more successful. Now, this being said, we do need to separate big multinationals with big budgets and big resources and expertise from small SMEs, which constitute more than 90% of our business landscape in the region, in the Middle East region, especially in the UAE. They are in a completely different setup. So if you look at SMEs, there is an issue of awareness. First of all, they need to understand what this is going to bring to the table for them, why they should do it. This is requiring extra learning, extra resources. So it's very important for them to understand this. Also, they need financing. And often they don't understand how should I access financing? What does it take to access? How do I meet the requirements of ESG-focused investors and leaders? So a lot of resources and time are required, know-how, and this is where they need the most support. And most importantly, if you look at big multinationals who managed to win the ESG game in terms of delivering ideas that deliver profits, they did a lot of trial and error. This also involved a redesign of how the companies operate. A lot of projects that are tried, some of them succeed, so some of them don't succeed, and this is how this works. We don't see all these possibilities happening at the SMEs level. So we see, for example, startups could be more successful when they are wired from the start towards sustainability, whether it's environment, whether it's social, whether it's governance. If they are wired and aware from the beginning, they can do that. If they are startups that have been existing for a while, have their traditional way of operations, this is harder for them to implement and to embed, whether it's the E or the S or the G within their modes of operation. So this is the challenge we have today. It's first of all an awareness, second in enabling through upskilling, and also, how can we bridge this gap with Islamic banking? Thank you.
A lot of interesting points. I was very clearly that I'm expecting, given your background, to focus more on the communication, on the awareness part. I think it is no doubt it is something very important, because I would connect the dots and say, if you want to drive consensus, awareness is important. If you want to have a push or rather a pull from the customer side, again, awareness is important. You also touched upon embedding it in the operations, implementing it in the operations. And I think technology has and will have an increasingly important role to play in making sure that it is embedded in the operations. It is embedded in the operations in such a way that it doesn't add to the cost element. So I'm going to come to you, Melina. Simply from the role of technology, right? And what it, how is it important, to enable ESG, to enable, in the operations, in the day-to-day operations, in the ability of a financial institution to come up with newer products and newer services. What would you say?
Actually, technology will play a big role to help financial institutions implement and achieve their ESG goals. The biggest challenge remain on how to accurately track ESG performance. I will start with AI that is currently revolutionizing the way we used to do things. So by relying on AI, we will be in a position to analyze data from across the company to help us identify any ESG goals from, let's say, how diverse our workforce is, how sustainable our supply chain is, how the level of carbon emission or any other ESG metrics. Once this data is at hand, it will help the company review their operational processes in order to meet the ESG goals. For other examples on AI is whenever we rely on this technology to segregate or classify possible investments, possible companies, possible projects, possible securities between more environment friendly against less environmentally committed companies or projects. So by relying on these algorithms, we will be able to direct our funds and even raise social awareness by sharing this information with our clients through also digital apps to encourage them to circulate their savings into more environment friendly investments, therefore boosting or increasing the funds that are circulated into this sector. We can also rely on digital tools, any digital tools like any other reporting. You know, we've been into reporting with international, in compliance with international regulatory bodies or local regulatory bodies. So here to report also in compliance with an additional standard, we definitely need to rely on more digital tools to minimize on time usually spent on reporting, which is, as I said, it's not only restricted to ESGs, but it will help a lot at this stage. Another example, which cannot pass unnoticed, is whenever we rely on the blockchain. And we see that recently in the region, there is a good appetite towards mostly green sukuk, whether banks are issuing it or investors seeking possible investment in these tools. So blockchain will boost the transparency of how we are spending the money we are raising from any green sukuk issuance, and it will help increase the trust of the investors in this company who is issuing sukuk and so on. Because, you know, based on the blockchain technology, each and every penny can be monitored, how it was raised, how it has been spent, whether it was accurately spent within the purpose it was raised for. So technology, and it's a mix of every tool that will eventually help the companies raise awareness, increase their investments, and so on.
Very interesting. You bring up blockchain, and when blockchain comes up, I cannot not, go back to Vikram. Vikram, maybe a minute or two, you could just explain, how you are using blockchain to actually, do what you're doing, right?
So I think the greatest privilege of technology is transparency, traceability, and access. And blockchain essentially summarizes that in a very interesting way. So far, it's been used really from an institutional perspective, but I'm more interested in scale and a B2C model that enables blockchain to become a lot more real and available to people to consume on an ongoing basis. So the area that I represent, which is conservation, so essentially what we do is we protect forests from getting destroyed in different parts of the world. And an aspect of that is generating ongoing funding for the conservation of nature. And for that, we've created conservation tokens that are available on our apps. And each of these tokens are on the blockchain for transparency and traceability perspective. And at $50, individuals from all over the world are now embarking on a journey to embrace conservation and take that forward. So it's an interesting use case for blockchain. We are presenting that all over the world. Individuals and companies from 34 countries are already on the platform. So it's a rapidly growing area. And we believe that the application of this is quite universal
Mm.
in the years to come.
Uh, Fantastic, Vikram. Thank you for that. I think blockchain as a technology has always been intriguing. Uh, I think there was a lot of buzz and chatter about blockchain a few years ago, and then the buzz and the chatter dropped down, and people started saying, "Oh, it was just a buzz," and all of that. But I think blockchain as a technology has very strong use cases, and it's a technology that you cannot have an alternative to it. So I think it's for the use cases that you have for blockchain, that's the only technology. So I think it's something that we should be not dismissing and just letting or saying that it is not important. A very interesting topic, around AI. We've been talking about AI. Generative AI is the new buzzword after blockchain, and I do want to, pose a poll question at this point of time, which is exactly around AI. So let me just launch that one. All right. Poll number two. How do you see AI, artificial intelligence, shaping the advancement and effectiveness of ESG frameworks across industries? Your first option is enabling real time data analysis for ESG performance. Second is automating the reporting side and ensuring the compliance. Again, you have to choose one, you cannot choose all, unfortunately. The third is enhancing the mitigation side of the ESG risks. Fourth is innovation when it comes to ESG strategies, the solutions, products and services, and all of that. So again, I'm sure if there was a option which said all of the above, that would be the option that everyone would want to select. But we want to really put, ask people within those what are the most interesting or the most important ones, right? So that's the reason why we wanted to ask this question. I'm going to end the poll, share the results. It's the innovation. I'm surprised with this because we would expect that data analysis, which seems to have clear use cases that everyone is using already, reporting that everyone is using already. But innovation is the one that has garnered most responses. Does this surprise you? And I'm going to put this question to you, Atif. Does this response surprise you that you, or is it like people are more forward looking when they respond?
Yeah. So, funnily enough, if I was able to, take the poll question as a presenter, I would have probably selected this answer for myself. So, perhaps it's easier for me to elaborate. Look, I think this is the right way to look at AI. AI is there to support you to do things in a different way, and not try to do, be creative on your own all the time. One looks at, inspiration. One looks at creativity in different ways. So I think the best way for us to really crack the ESG egg and make an omelette is to use AI as a secret ingredient. At the end of the day, look, automation of reports and stuff, you don't need AI for that. Real time data analysis, perhaps yes. But what do you need that real time data analysis for? Is to come up with the right answers. And if AI can give you those answers and insights of, hey, this is what we should do, or this is what you should be doing, or you're not doing enough of, that kind of story will help us build the next platform that allows you to then go and do work on new product development, especially if I talk about banking. I think if you see in the consumer space, there are not enough or any real green products available except EV financing today,
Mm,
right? So the access to customers, the innovation that we need which is very very inherent requirement right now, is that how do banks really start to develop new products and services that are inspired by ESG. And I think that's where AI can play a very important role in terms of not just doing customer sentiment analysis, customer demographics analysis, need analysis, to say that, look, this is perhaps the direction to go into. Should we be doing financing of your solar panels in UAE? Should we be doing what Vikram talked about? Is there a savings account that, instead of paying you interest or profit, is going to go and fund saving trees or planting trees? So there are things that we should be doing as banks, and I think using AI to drive that product development piece is extremely important, because if we talk about bankers know how to make money, right? And they need that kind of an extra push or extra creativity and ideation around that. Okay, what's coming next? So yeah, we can take inspiration from what is happening in other industries, but for us to do a really good job for our customers and clients, I think it's important to have AI help us figure some of those answers out, because the age today is, launch a product. If it fails, learn from it, fail fast. Everybody knows that. So that's the mantra. So adopting AI will probably help banks drive this agenda more. That's what I believe. And that's where I would agree with most of the pollsters who have responded. Yeah, over to you, Nikhil.
Is there anything, any initiative that you are currently doing or looking at, or maybe in the near future, when it comes to utilizing AI for ESG and for of course Islamic finance?
Yeah. So if I talk about Emirates Islamic and Emirates NBD Group together, I think our focus right now uh, is to focus more on Gen AI, and we
Mm.
have multiple use cases already in play. Some are in development stage to really help improve our service levels. Customer service is very very close to our heart. So I think our right now our focus is to tap into the AI capability to really serve our customers better. And I think as the time progresses, we are going to perhaps go and look more into this, new product development phase, which I am
Mhm.
personally very, very, interested in pursuing, because I think that's the game changer. Especially if I talk about Islamic banks. See,
Mhm.
Islamic banks have done enough of mimicking of conventional banks for the last, 2 decades. And this is the phase where, leveraging ESG and our Sharia principles, we can actually, be ahead of conventional banks when it comes to innovation, which is very much lacking, right? Innovation should not be just bucketed in a digital app on the phone. Innovation could mean a lot of new things. And I think that's where ESG and Islamic finance give us the best opportunity to, move ahead of conventional banks in this space. Yeah. Back to you, Nikhil.
I completely agree. I think we have just scratched the surface, especially Gen AI. I think uh, we've been using it for simple, basic things like maybe writing emails and stuff, right? But I think the application is going to be huge going forward, and very interesting that you've already started utilizing it. Of course, you said that it's customer awareness and customer interactions right now, but product development, I think that's the way to go. I saw Nada. I saw you smile when Atif spoke about the some of the environmental applications, right? Of how Islamic finance could be used on some of these products. Any thoughts on that one? Any examples that jump to your mind?
Yes, so thank you very much. So one of the first things that jumped to my mind when you had your poll up was that awareness was not there, learning was not there. And this is something that really AI can help us with. And we at SBJ, as an academic institution, we have decided to integrate AI as much as possible to make our students super students or super learners. And we have developed the AI tutor that is like a co-assistant with the professor to help students not only learn at their pace, but also to help the student learn some basic concepts before coming to class and leveraging the classroom time for interactive and application-based interactions. What I'm trying to say here is that today AI has that big potential to make every employee within the organization a super sustainability champion. And this is what we really need here, because when we train companies here in the region, we see that companies, even SMEs, are at different levels of their sustainability journey. So most of them are not even starting to implement it because they didn't yet upskill themselves. They didn't yet develop the awareness. So I totally see how we can develop an AI tutor for these SMEs that will not only have like course outline of what do they need to learn, and they could do this at their own pace. And then they will start by learning why is it urgent, what can they do, learning various topics and subtopics. And what is very interesting that could be done is, and this is the big gap as well, is that SMEs don't have time to try for trial and error and experimentation, and don't have the budget or don't have the resources to do that. What we can do is that customize this AI tutor with the most successful use cases that are profit generators. And somebody from an SME can say, this is my job, this is what I'm doing, and now I want to implement ESG at the level of my job. Please give me the profit-making cases, profit-making scenarios. And then the AI tutor can guide these people who would like to champion AI, who would like to upskill themselves into their learning journey as per their constraints, time constraints, and resource constraints. So for me, learning is the number one value add when we look especially at our region in terms of awareness gap and in terms of, resources gap to move to implementation. Thank you.
Very interesting point you bring up, and you spoke about it earlier as well. The point about the SMEs, maybe the big corporations, they may have enough resources to, invest in everything, but not SMEs enough. And I think banks, I would say, play a very important role in the sense what you just said that, okay, what has worked in one region, how can you now productize it? How can you create a product around it? You use the word super sustainability champions. Maybe, if something, food for thought for you, that particular terminology. But, how do you take these success stories, create awareness, productize it, and then take it to different market, different industries? And I think, there's your answer in that sense. I would say that, AI is there and these, interesting use cases are there, and then you productize it. Uh, I'm going to take the conversation further and take it into the Islamic finance side of it. Um, I'm going to come back to you, Atif. About the principles of Islamic finance. I know you represent a Islamic finance institution. Uh, how does it naturally align with ESG? How do you say that everything that you do day in and day out is aligned to the ESG frameworks?
Very good question. And I'll try to summarize it by highlighting maybe 3 or 4 key points, right? I'll talk about some Sharia principles and how ESG side, especially the environmental and social, also the governance, right? As a Muslim, we all believe that we are here, all human beings are here as a Khalifa on this planet, which basically means that it is our responsibility to take care of this planet and the environment and the resources, everything, right? So I think that belief itself of Khilafat as us humans on this planet, we owe, safeguarding the environment. So that's your first tick mark. The second tick mark is that, okay, when you talk about social justice and equity and compassion, uh, again, very much ingrained in Sharia principles. Everything that we do has to, revolve around social justice, poverty alleviation, financial inclusion. All these principles, bang on social part of the S. And on the governance side, these are cliched words, but we live up to them. Accountability, transparency. Vikram also touched base on this earlier. And the way this happens in an Islamic bank, especially, is that we have a Sharia supervisory board. So in addition to your, audit and compliance and risk departments, we also have Sharia board and we have a Sharia auditor. So that added layer is again helping us to be more transparent, more accountable, and they ensure that we are adhering to all these principles of, Sharia. So when you combine all these things together, you already have an 80% ready solution, which is ESG compliant. The only thing that we
Mm.
have to do as an added layer is that from a regulatory perspective or from a global standard perspective, do we need to go the extra few steps in order to be aligned at that level? So I think that's where, the story for Islamic banking comes together. And then if you keep these things in mind that, okay, we have to be environmentally safe, we are not going to finance any, things that can harm the environment or anything that is related to war or drugs and this and that or any other this kind of thing. We will stay ethical. So by doing that and promoting that, I think there's a way to create value for everyone, and that value then starts to come through, as Ananda talked about, that look, SMEs need help. Nikhil, you also mentioned banks have to play an important role in this space, right? So for us as banks, especially in Islamic bank, I think adhering to the Sharia principles and then taking the right decisions in terms of what big projects to finance, right? So for example, in a UE context, are we doing enough on water conservation? Right, it's a big topic, right, to our heart, right where we live, right? So what are we doing in that space, or what are we doing about environment? As Vikram mentioned earlier, the earth is getting hotter. So what are the things that we can do here in our society in the UAE in order to take care of those things? So I think those things are something where I think we still have to bridge that gap in terms of what is our need to how we can come up with financing solutions. But financing solutions can only exist if there are certain key projects that are being designed at an infrastructure level or at an economic activity level that banks can finance, right? So there has to be enough of that framework to start to appear in the economy for us to play a bigger role. And I think that's where the private sector and the banks have to work together to figure out what are those, sustainable things, more in the business terms, not just in terms of the sustainability part. What are those things that can stay on, and where banks can facilitate for SMEs or corporates to scale those things up? I think that's where the real conversation of Islamic finance can head in the future. Back to you, Nikhil.
Thank you so much. Really, I think that was a very important, a very, you made it very clear. Thank you so much. And you made it come real as well. I have a question from Jane Kai. If you can hear us, Jen, uh, can you ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me clearly?
If we can hear you, if you can introduce yourself quickly and ask your question.
Sure. So, I'm also very passionate at this topic. I've, taken some notes from Vikram as well as Nada. Just want to share my comments in terms of what are the industry cases that's available we could consider. So in corporate banking, there's embedded finance, which could greatly help, let's say, medium-sized to corporates. What I do find is it's difficult to convince the customers to follow certain practices. But if we do find, let's say, from their transactions, we see there's an area we can improve how they choose their vendors or etc., that can open the new doors. Second of all, for personal banking, there's carbon tracking as well as offsetting, but it's not hugely, let's say, used in this region yet. There are great examples, let's say, in HSBC, Hong Kong, as well as PwC research. There's a lot. It's just in terms of gaining that awareness and actually implementing in the practice in this region is not there yet. Third, the products such as green loans for auto and home, I think that's also can be explored in the retail sector. So these are the three products I think we can refer to. Last but not least, in terms of learning, what Nada has mentioned, there are great resources out there, but whether how it's helping us to make a behavioral, let's say, decisions to change to green behavior or apply that in the banking sector, there's a little bit gap. I do know that in DFC there is a green fintech mini series which you could take 3 to 5 hours that can broaden that knowledge piece. So I just want to share my comments and then see how we can better move things forward in terms of products oriented or awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I think very interesting. For some reason, it's going back to Nada, your point about the awareness, and I think very important for the critical mass to be created. Your reaction, Nada?
So definitely awareness is a big component. However, all the research shows that awareness is not enough to bridge the action intention gap. So all the research is showing that we need to do something more than awareness. Awareness is just the first step. And Jane was right. And what research is showing and what's working is to create ecosystems of excellence, to create communities of excellence. So this is something that I know because I have participated to many government workshops that the government is trying to work on creating these ecosystems so that companies can come together and see how they can work together. But yet, for me, I find that more partnerships should be created, that there are not enough partnerships at the root level. A lot of partnerships still happen at the communication level. And this is normal because companies from the same industry are used to compete. And all of a sudden, we're asking them, okay, let's collaborate and find solutions together. So this is a little bit harder. But for us, if we want to move the needle on action, for example, in Islamic finance, all the Islamic banks have to come together and develop an ecosystem that will support the learning and that will support this movement through awards, through badges, through certifications, something that will create these communities of excellence to move the needle on action. Because awareness, yes, it's very important. It's just the first step. It's not enough for action. Thank you.
Vikram, I noticed you unmuted yourself.
Yes, I wanted to just add that I'm fascinated by the rise of Islamic digital banks. And I can see that they are approaching this topic quite differently. So in the UAE, there's Ruya Bank, which launched early part of last year. So what I find really interesting about them is that they have a program called Nature Protect. So as customers grow their balances with Ruya Bank, more and more nature gets protected. For every 1,000 dirhams, a square foot of forest gets protected. And you're able to see that on their application. So that's a very interesting and a real example of how conservation and environmental stewardship has been built into the customer journey of Islamic banking, as such. But the larger point I want to make is that let's understand that Islamic banking is quite a young industry. 3 decades back, it was hardly there, right? Now it's a $4.5 billion industry. Yeah. And it represents 1% of global capital. Yeah. And if you were to just look at Islamic orientation, about a quarter of the world's population follows the faith. So there's a large runway ahead. I think the opportunity for Islamic banking really is in the transition journey. So as the world gets hotter, Probably every industry has to reconfigure itself, yeah,
Mm.
and has to look at ways in which it can still do business in a manner which is profitable and sustainable. So every business has got inbuilt inefficiencies. So I was at the food industry last week. One third of the food that we produce as humanity gets wasted by the time it comes to our table. Yeah. Last month I was with the energy industry. 67% of the energy that gets produced gets wasted by the time it reaches our homes.
Oh.
Yeah. So every industry has very serious efficiency issues, which requires technology innovation, which requires banks to, fund capex to enable those new innovations to come into play. And Islamic banking, because it is very values driven and ethics enabled, um, and also the fitment naturally with ESG principles, is in a very strong position to grab that from a corporate bank as well as from a personal banking aspect. And of course, the larger opportunity is that can these principles appeal a lot more to the non-Islamic followers of the faith as well, which I'm sure will happen because at the end of the day, a lot of us get attracted to ethics, transparency, and values. And the Islamic community has an opportunity to gather that and create some momentum around it.
Thank you, Vikram. I think it's more such conversations are definitely needed, and it's time that the conversations turn into actions and reality because we keep saying that we owe the owe our planet to our children, and I think the children are growing up very quickly. My child is now past his teens, so he's going to question me very soon. And I think every young child is going to question, and we are responsible to provide the right answers and act on what we say. I'm going to bring Melina into the conversation on a slightly different note. And I know we spoke about SMEs requiring financing, and that's where the bigger need in terms of resourcing. But I'm going to not talk about SME or financing for SMEs. I'm going to talk about this SME banks. I'm going to talk about the large banks. Maybe they have the resources. Let's talk about the smaller and mid-size, tier two, tier three banks. NBFC, non-banking financial corporations. Why? How can technology help them offer and compete more effectively in Islamic finance when it comes to playing against the big boys? How does technology help?
Okay. Actually, you presented it quite well because big banks they have budget at hand. They can do whatever it takes from AI to blockchain or whatever heavy technology at hand. The challenge remains at smaller banks, as you said. However, doing Islamic finance has been already in compliance with the condition of social commitment. We know the rules within Islamic finance is this equitable distribution of profit or profit sharing and so on. Besides, as socially, Islamic finance has been really committed to social advancement or social progress since decades. And usually, even SMEs or mid-sized banks or Islamic financial institution in this time, they have already a mobile app or a digital wallet. So it's not very expensive from investment perspective. So already this mobile app and digital wallet and crowdfunding platforms will allow them to reach the underserved communities, the rural areas. They can tackle or offer financing to smaller businesses, to individuals in rural areas, and so on. So they can reach rural areas in Africa, let's say, through a basic mobile bank application where they can onboard unbanked customers. They can offer any type of small financing. The microfinance the microfinance business has a very promising growth actually. As I said, it targets small cap companies and low income individual. So even mid-sized banks or Islamic financial institution, they have a great role in serving those communities and expanding social services across their populations.
Thank you. I think we just have 3 more minutes left, and I'm surprised that uh, now is the time when the topic of financial inclusion came in. So I think it's very interesting ground you've covered so far, and I would have loved to explore this topic even more. But as I said, we just have 3 more minutes. I do want to bring in one last question, more like a rapid fire to all of you. And the rule is very simple. If you go first, you can choose everything and anything you want to say. But if you go second and the third and the fourth, you can't repeat what your previous speakers have already said. So you can choose whether you want to go first or second or third or fourth. All right. So the rapid fire question, which is common to all of you, is what is the single most transformative trend in ESG aligned Islamic finance? So I think the focus is more on Islamic finance. What is the single most transformative trend that you want all of us to look out for in the next 2 to 3 years?
Okay, I'll go first to make my life simple. Uh, look, I think it has already started, but I think it will grow is the whole sustainability linked sukuks. I think that's the key because that's one way for banks to raise their funding. And that's one way of growing our green assets. So I think this is an area where as we grow our green assets in banks, right now our portfolio is very much geared towards certain specific industries. We have a EV portfolio, we have certain corporate relationships, but as we go along, I think this ESG sukuk thing, where we are looking at carbon cutting initiatives and we are financing those, and we are doing a bunch of other things in the environmental space. I think those kind of projects, mega projects or smaller projects, you can look at it in that way, would definitely come into play. And this whole piece of sustainability linked sukuk space, I think that's going to grow further and further. Just to give you an example of why this is, last year we did our first ESG sukuk of $750 million, and it was oversubscribed about 2.5 3 times, and 80 90% of that was coming from Western investors, not just domestic. So that shows the kind of demand that there is, but we don't have enough green assets today to go and seek more funding to do more good stuff as banks. So I think that's the space to really focus on, because that's the indicator of the investor demand and interest. And if that demand and interest stays there, we as banks, going back to your very first question of making money, that's one way of lowering costs and providing better services. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, sustainability linked sukuks, I think putting money where your mouth is, very interesting point. Next up, who would want to go second? There's Nada who's going to take it.
So for me, all these financial products are very interesting, and I believe in the potential of Islamic sukuks and Islamic financing. Now, for me, the future should be about bridging the gap of access. How can small SMEs have access to these financing? The fact that we design them, I mean, there is no question that consumers or customers are looking for more authentic products, values-driven products, and with Islamic finance, values are embedded within the DNA of such products. So there is a huge potential, especially in an age of AI, where now we're going to look for more authentic products, because everything now, we are becoming suspicious. Trust is going to become a problem. And all of a sudden, we have these sukuks, green sukuks, that are value-backed and DNA-backed, rooted in Islam. So this is a great potential, but we need to take it the extra mile and embed the social in bridging that gap of access. Even if these banks can come together and work together to facilitate the access and to have a disproportionate access of SMEs to their products as opposed to a mainstream bank. This for me will be the ultimate proof that these banks are really doing the right thing from a values perspective, bridging that gap. And in this case, they will cease to be a niche products only for people with an Islamic religion, and they would become a mainstream product. I think that's a big potential. Thank you.
Perfect. Access for SMEs and more, becoming not copying conventional, but becoming standing on your own. Melinda, I'm going to, come to you. I'm going to, put you in the spot because I think access and, probably what you will say is going to be linked.
Actually, I wanted to talk about the potential of the green sukuk, but already Atif elaborated on the matter. So probably what we will be waiting for in the region is to have a clearly defined regulatory framework which will allow companies or institutions to abide by, especially that in the Middle East for Islamic institution, beside the local regulators or regional regulators, we have AOFI who sets clear standards when it comes to Sharia compliance and so on. So hopefully in the upcoming period, we'll have a clearly defined regulatory framework.
Vikram, your life is the toughest now.
No, it's actually I would say all of the above. What I'm most excited about is innovation and how Islamic banking can actually accelerate their innovation agenda. In that, the topics of interest to me personally are new business models. So I think digital Islamic banks is an interesting one. I'm also very curious to see how peer-to-peer lending will take shape, keeping Islamic principles in mind. Crowdfunding, because if you look at the fundamentals of Islamic banking, it's also about communities coming together and helping each other. So crowdfunding is ripe for ESG and Islamic banking practices to come into play together. I think all of this will get enabled through technology. So very keen to see how generative AI gives recommendations that are based on Islamic principles that are essentially linked towards how people live, work, and play and do business. So very exciting. Next 10 years for this sector is going to be very, very interesting to see. But a lot depends upon the culture of the organization and the ability of boards to be able to push that agenda and invest in innovation. So I'm yet to see in Islamic bankings having an R&D budget. So I would recommend people on this call who are in the sector to start creating and setting aside R&D budgets so that new models are experimented with, and then they become the next driver for the from the 1% market share. How can Islamic banking rise to a double digit over the next couple of decades? Clearly, new ideas are needed for it.
Perfect. We are 5 minutes over time, and I think some very, very interesting topics, points that have come up. I would, definitely highlight, starting with not making ESG a checkbox item, but it can actually create products and services around it and make real money, real profitability. We spoke a lot about how regulation, and Melinda, you spoke about it towards the end as well, how regulation is important, how consensus is important, and to drive consensus, how awareness is important. I think something that Nada, you also talked about. Last but not the least, innovation. Atif is already signed up, and Vikram, I would say that there is R&D budget already because Atif is investing in AI and in Gen AI. So you may call it differently, but there is R&D budget out there. And last but not the least, I think the most uh, a requirement of ESG and Islamic finance is for the SME sectors. That's where the innovation is also going to happen. So, if SME sector is, I would say, one of the ripe sectors, right sized companies for innovation, both as a consumer as and a generator of ideas. So, I think really interesting thoughts, interesting idea. I think such kind of dialogue is required. And as I said, it's time for us, all of us, to go forward and convert this dialogue into real action. The sukuks are real action for sure, but more such sukuks needed, more such ideas needed, and more such collaboration of ideas required. I think. Thank you so much to my speakers for joining in and being very open with your ideas and thoughts. Much appreciated. Thank you, everyone who's joined us as delegates, as attendees. I hope there is one thing that you could take back today and use it as a conversation starter to make real change, put it in real action. Thank you so much for joining in, and hopefully we will be able to will get an opportunity to continue this dialogue going forward as well.